Well, okay. We should probably get started. It's 12:01 and folks have started entering the room. We'll on-ramp slowly to give more folks an opportunity to get in. But hello to those of you that have joined us. My name's Don Taylor, and I'm the director of the School for Workers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Um, and actually, I'm going to pause for just a moment because I'm not seeing as well. Okay, I'll keep going. I'm the director of the School for Workers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The School for Workers is the oldest continuously operating labor education, university-based labor education program in the country, coming up on our 100th anniversary in 2025. And this is Labor Forward, our live online broadcast that we do once a month, where we focus on victories and other positive developments for workers and unions. And our guest today is Ben Gruber, who is the president of AFSCME Local 1215. I'll let him talk about what he does for work and who the members of his union are. So Ben, why don't you just tell us about the local that you're the president of and what type of work you folks do.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Glad to be here. So again, Ben Gruber, President, Conservation Wardens, Local 1215. We're an AFSCME local, part of Council 32, and we represent the Conservation Wardens who work for the DNR in Wisconsin DNR, and also potentially the forest rangers. So the credentialed law enforcement folks who are within the Wisconsin DNR. That's our local. That's who we represent.
Cool, cool. And I don't want to necessarily assume that everybody in the room even fully understands what someone in your line of work even does. So can you give us a quick synopsis?
Yeah, so within the DNR, there's several statutes, administrative codes, and rules that fall to the DNR to enforce, and that's where the wardens and the rangers come in. Our job, our duties are to protect our natural resources, all the way from environmental laws and spills, and responding to emergencies to investigating ATV and recreational vehicle crashes. Intoxicated boating enforcement, hunting, fishing, poaching, state parks laws, all the laws of the state within our state properties, on all the state forests, arson, timber theft, just probably the widest variety in most diverse law enforcement agencies that exist are probably your natural resources law enforcement, and that's where the wardens and the rangers of the DNR, the members that I represent, that's a real quick synopsis of our job duties. We could probably be here all day just breaking some of those down, but
Yeah.
it's incredibly varied. We have full arrest powers on our state properties, and authority throughout the state, and do law enforcement investigations, arrests, charges, work with district attorneys and county sheriffs uh, to enforce all of that stuff.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that for everybody. Before we continue, I figure I should explain to folks what our general game plan will be today. If you haven't tuned in to Labor Forward before, is Ben and I will have a conversation for 20 or 25 minutes or so. And then we'll open it up to your questions, and we'll have a few minutes for that. The whole broadcast, if I may call it that, usually doesn't take more than 30 or 40 minutes. Sometimes it's a little longer, sometimes it's a little shorter. We don't worry too much about sticking to an exact time. Um, so with that said, I do want to dig into I think the part of your story that that plays into the theme of our program, about moving forward. I'll just say as an introductory comment that um, you folks were, as state employees, were obviously impacted by Act 10 back in 2011, but in recent years, you've had a bit of a turnaround, and I won't say much more detail than that because I want you to be able to talk about it. So let's roll back to 2011 and the years right after that with Act 10. What were the impacts on your local?
Yeah, so it's tough for me to talk about 2011 through 2019, which is when I started full time. I'll just say, historically, what I know, uh, in 2011, pre-Act 10, we were nearly 100% membership. The union was strong. We had a say in our working conditions. We were negotiating contracts, and we had the ability to use that contract to hold the state accountable to following the rules. Uh, when I came on in 2019, I remember there was just a brief talk. Somebody came to our recruit academy for a few minutes and mentioned that there was a union, and that was about it. And I came from a union job. I was a IAFF firefighter paramedic in Wisconsin before that, so I was a union member. Um, but there just you could tell there wasn't energy behind it. And then in 2023, in March, January, February, March of 2023, I had a few people approach me and started having a discussion about trying to resurrect the union. So when we started having those conversations, we went and found out, got our membership list. At that time, I think there was 8 members who were paying dues paying members of Local 1215. When we dug a little deeper, we found out 2 of those had been retired for several months and um, either chosen to continue paying or just quite frankly didn't realize that they were still paying. So we had 6 members. We had 6 active members. And out of we roughly estimate our membership to be, around 200, 170 to 200, depending on how we count. And,
You
if we
mean
use the
eligible members?
eligible
Yeah,
members,
yeah.
people who we would, if we had a bargaining unit, people we would consider to be eligible members for that
Mm-hmm.
bargaining unit.
Okay.
Um, so we had 6 out of, approximately 180 eligible members. In March of 2023, I took over as the president, and we'll touch a little bit more on that story later, probably. But from March of 2023 to today, I think we sit at just shy of 90 members. So without doing the math, we're pushing 1,500% growth
Mm.
in 18 months. It's been incredible, and I take very little of the credit for that, other than being at times just too stupid to quit. And that's been a lot of the keys to our success. And there's a lot of different nuance to that story, but we have had significant growth. And as I'm sure a lot of the people listening today are aware, our local is a plaintiff on the Act 10 lawsuit, and I am personally a plaintiff on the Act 10 lawsuit. But that's had very little to do with our growth. We've grown in spite of Act 10 and in spite of that lawsuit. We feel like our legal arguments there are incredibly valid, and I have high hopes for that. But I'm not waiting for it. We have workers to protect, and we have things that are happening that are bad, and we're going to focus on those and continue to grow. So our growth story has been, by all accounts from other union leaders in the state, especially public sector, unprecedented. So that's been really
Mm.
exciting. Um,
And I just want to highlight for folks that I mean the growth story, as you call it, basically started with what you and what 2 other coworkers talking to each
yeah,
other and saying, what can we do to turn this around? And so it just started with, 2 or 3 people sitting around a table saying, what can we do?
yeah. And that conversation it started with what options do we have to try and make our work lives better? The situation has become untenable. People were leaving. We were seeing high turnover. People just had a ton of frustration. They tried every avenue they could to try and make their voices heard. Here's our concerns with our workplace, and it wasn't working. People were just beating their heads against the wall. People were transferring out. People were taking other jobs, and that's how the conversation started. And somebody made the comment: if we still had the union, none of
Mm,
this would have ever happened. To which somebody replied, "We still have a union. We don't have collective bargaining. We don't have a bargaining unit, but we still have a union. And a union is just a group of people standing together and standing up for what's right." So that really spurred the conversation. It was three of us. We met at the Village Green in Middleton, and sat around a bar table and said, "Is this? Can we do this? Will we do this? Will we commit to it?" The four of us were willing. We said, "Yeah, we will." Out of that group of There was four of us there. One of them was one of the six members. The other three of us weren't. We signed up that day. And I think Council 32 saw uh, I think that was a surprise. I don't know that AFSCME in the public sector is seeing new members outside of a few select association models where they, have kind of a different model. So we decided then and there that that's what we were going to do. It is probably relevant now to talk about why me.
mm,
What was it? Why did they approach me? And why was I willing to do it? And what about that has allowed people to feel comfortable to join? So I actually got fired from the DNR back in, it was over summer of 2020. I got fired, and the reasons listed were for failure to wear the right patches on my uniform and failure to complete assignments and another thing. Which was very much pretextual. So I had reported some discriminatory behavior and spoken out against it and stood up for it.
mm,
So the reasons they listed were pretextual, and they fired me, and that's been a pattern within employment in the state, and we've seen it at our Department of Corrections, we've seen it at DNR, we've seen it happen through several of our AFSCME locals where the whistleblowers are retaliated against with zero accountability for management. That's been that to my very firm belief is a result of Act 10, and the lack of a collective bargaining contract to hold people accountable and have a contract. So
mm,
I was only fired for 10 weeks, and it would have been shorter than that, but it took my attorney, I think, 6 weeks to get a letter sent over. Once we sent a letter and said, "Hey, we're going to sue," they were real quick to say, "Well, hang on. What is it that we can do to keep you from doing that?" So I got my job back, and that was fall of 2020. And then I'd hoped to see some change. I thought that me doing that was going to affect positive change. And what I saw was that the culture of retaliation and discrimination and singling out whistleblowers and punishing them through the discipline process, through performance evaluations, that was cultural and it ran deep, and me alone was not going to fix it. So that my willingness to stand up and not let that wrong go unaddressed, and also I think people saw me as somebody who'd already been through the ringer, and was willing to stand up for it. And I think already being fired once, as they stated, in whole or in part for challenging discrimination, gave me a little bit of a shield, a protective shield,
mm,
where maybe I was a little bit more immune to further retaliation. And I would probably agree. So that's why me. I don't think I have any special talents. I've never been a union leader before, but I had that little bit of a shield, that protective layer from already having been fired once, and I think that inspired people to feel more comfortable that they could be part of this movement, and maybe that there was hope. So that was the start of it. Uh, from there, the approach that we took was never trying to recruit everybody. Um, we focused hard initially on picking the right people, uh, that people would feel comfortable and look up to in respect, especially for us being a statewide local geographically. Out of
mm,
180 potential members, they're spread through. 72 counties of the state. We can't meet in the parking lot after work. There's maybe two of us that share a parking lot. So that makes it incredibly difficult, and I think also points to how cool it is that we've had such success and growth.
Yeah.
Um, what I did was looked for people who in their region were people that were one uh, willing to take a stand and put their name on it. So they had to have that willingness to be brave. I picked four stewards, one from each region. Said, hey, like you're gonna put your face out there, like you're going to potentially get retaliated against. This is not gonna be uh, well received by our management, and it wasn't. To this day, they refuse to acknowledge us and they refuse to meet with us. So those four
Mm,
people, once I got them on board, I just said, hey, here's the deal. Now there's 10 of us. Now there's 12. What I want is every single person in this room, on this form, this membership form, to recruit one person. Pick the person that you see that will inspire others and make them feel comfortable. And that's been our approach. It's
mm,
never been, let's hit this number, let's get these people, let's get that thing. I just want everybody to get one. And we continue to tell the people that come on board that that's what I want from you. Pick one. Um, we have continued to keep our membership list, semi-secret. I don't even share a membership list with our members yet,
mm,
because they still are so fearful of retaliation. But we're starting to turn the tide on that. I think people are becoming more comfortable. I think we've reached a point where there's power in our numbers, right? If we were still 20, I think there's a legitimate fear that maybe 20 people can get singled out. We're over 50% now, or very close. So I think we're reaching that point where maybe we can start to change that. So I think that's a little bit of
mhm.
our story, and I'll give a pause there and see if I inspire any questions from you, Don.
Well, it's a great story, and I think you know anybody in the public or private sector uh, can learn a lot from your experience, um, because it isn't a magic recipe, right? It's basic organizing that you guys figured out how to do. Tell me to say a little bit more. There's two things I want to ask about, but I don't want to pull us too far down too many rabbit holes. But um, say a little bit more about the conversations that you were having with people about joining. Like what, when typically when organizing, um, we have to deal with people's objections, people's concerns and questions, and generally somebody who's just happy, everything's fine, is less likely to join. So I'm guessing that that you've mentioned the kind of like the culture of retaliation, but I'm curious, what were some of the issues that were upsetting people that the things they wanted to see changed at work, but also what were some of the obstacles that you faced in talking to them?
Yeah. So obstacles are easy to talk about. One is geography, just geographically spread all over the state,
Mm-hmm.
like I alluded to earlier. Another was just not being able to use use our state resources. To have to go out and get the personal phone numbers and emails for all these people spread all over the state was a tall order, and that's part of why we settled on the plus one rule. I'm not trying to recruit 180 people. I'm just trying to recruit one. So we gave that assignment to everybody. Go find your person, get me their personal emails and phone numbers, and I talked personally to just about every one of the members at some point, as they were joining, and that was a lot. I'm happy I did it. I'm happy to continue it, but that's a lot. And we've started to get to where I don't feel like everybody needs to talk to the president as they come on. We've started to get where our stewards and our officers, are people that our potential members are more comfortable talking to, and they recognize that they know people who are in the union and they can talk to them. So what I think one of that benefits and obstacles at the same time was initially being that public face, that very much the person who was the face of it because of my willingness to defy the retaliation fears. It was me. So an obstacle was just plain and simple, like my time. Like, how do I manage that? And it was tough, but I think I know I recognized and was very clear that I was willing to do that for a year or two, hoping that we build that ground level organization from the ground up, and we're getting there. One of the other obstacles was just fear of management finding out who was part of it, and just reassuring people that, hey, like, one of the outcomes of Act 10 was we can't have it payroll deducted your membership dues. So you choose. You choose how you pay it. Management will never know. And I will keep that membership list. It will be guarded. Our exec board, our stewards are the only ones that have access to it. At some point, people have to have a little trust, but for the most part, we've exclusively kept that, a very well kept secret. The only people telling other people who's a member is the members themselves.
Hmm.
So that's been one obstacle and how we overcame it. Uh, and I think another obstacle was just that overwhelming fear of retaliation, and some of that just took time. I think in the first year we saw we saw about 50 people willing to step forward and be part of it. And when that year went on, and I was still standing. I think that was enough for people to go, okay, I
Mm.
think that it's okay to give this a try now. Um, Obstacles was the second part of your question. What was the
Yeah.
first?
Well, the first one was like what issues are you find in those
Well,
conversations with people? What issues are you finding are driving people toward membership? I don't think I asked it the same way, but I
yeah,
think that's what I was getting at.
yeah. To quote Don Taylor, you need hope and anger. And we have that. I think I think a lot of what angered people was specifically the weaponization of the performance evaluation system and the discipline process to try and stifle dissent. That was number one. And I know that because I polled people. I polled them on personal email and text message and phone calls. And I said, give me your top two. Uh, and that was, in hindsight, I don't lay claim to having laid this out in really detailed thought on paper what my plan was. I don't, I probably should have done that, but that's one of the successes I think was reaching out to people and saying, hey, whether you join or not, tell me what your top two problems are. What are they? Rather than telling people what we were going to do and what we're going to go fight for, um, I said, what do you want us to fight for? And gave people that opportunity to have feedback. And without fail, I want to say 80% of the responses were retaliation and weaponization of these different management tools that they had to stifle dissent, not to discipline people who deserved it, not to weed out bad apples, but to to stifle dissent or to shush the whistleblowers or to hush people who spoke up against management. So that was issue number one. Uh, and that's what people have rallied around, and that's what we've been working and working and working to try and turn the tide on. And uh, if that, I guess, satisfies your question there,
It
maybe we
does.
can move on to some of the techniques that we've done to try
Yes.
and try and beat some of these problems down. Uh, you know, I think, for me, especially with us, with a young, I'm going to call us a young union. We never lost our union, but for all intents and purposes, we restarted our union almost from scratch in March of 2023. And I came in, with a chip on my shoulder, no doubt, and ready to saddle up and charge into the fray. I needed some direction and I needed some connections. So that's where reaching out to, our Council 32 staff, and trying to get some guidance on who my connections were. And then probably one of the smartest things I ever did, and I don't even remember how I came into this, but was joining our labor federation, where I live in the south central part of the state, and joining that at Scuffle, or South Central Federation of Labor, and just gaining some of those connections. And I got connected with people who'd been doing this forever and had connections in the area. Um, and we started by trying to reach out to our secretary's office. We work for a cabinet level executive functioning agency. So we reached out to our secretary's office, and we got ignored. So that was where from there we leaned on Council 32. With that relationship, we were able to get in and have a conversation. Problems weren't solved, but I think that there was maybe a circling of the wagons at that point. Issues that we were bringing up wasn't something that they wanted to address. Uh, it had functioned from their view quite well for quite a while. So it wasn't something that wanted to get aired out or addressed. So, we powered through that. We started reaching out. We had several conversations with different legislators. We had a few different meetings with a solidarity network that came through Scuffle, and that was productive. It got us a few different people who started putting pressure of their own to the governor's office,
Mm,
and started contacts outside of just hearing from me over and over again. Uh, and then we went back with our folks, our executive staff at Council 32, and we beat on doors and we pounded on doors, and we've met several times with different people. And I feel like if nothing else, government moves slow. I
mhm,
think that's probably one of the most painful things from this side, but I think we've made enough noise and we've brought attention to problems. We see these problems are pervasive with what everybody's probably read about with Department of Corrections, and then our problems at the DNR also. It's I wasn't afraid to use the press. I have probably a good relationship there because I used to write it was a very small local newspaper, but I wrote an outdoors column, and I've done a number of things over the years working with the press. And when we weren't able to get results by going through the quote unquote proper channels, the chain of command, and we have no contract to hold people accountable, we turn to the press to tell our story. And
mm,
there's been several different articles now, and that got people's attention. I think it adds credibility to your story. If you have a story that's significant like ours, where people are getting fired for retaliation and people are getting discriminated against, and the state's paying out settlement after settlement for discrimination, but nobody's held accountable, I think that's a story worth telling. And the newspapers seem to agree. And I think that in turn, politically, when you're a state worker, that gets the attention of the people who make decisions.
mhm,
So that was not a first go. I don't think anybody was excited to do that. I think we all know when mudslinging starts, everybody's going to get a little dirty. And we didn't use that without a lot of serious thought and without a lot of attempt to try and solve issues before we did that. Because once it gets aired out publicly, people have a right to know we're state workers, but also it just complicates everything. And again, everybody's going to get a little dirty, and you have to answer questions forever. So we didn't take that lightly, but it had the desired effect. It got us into doors of people who I think previously took the management line when management said there's nothing to see here, just a few disgruntled employees. I think that's what people believed. They said,
mhm,
"Oh, okay,
mhm,
you got this." But we refused to quit. We continued banging on that drum. We continued asking for meetings. We continued to talk publicly about our issues. And then one other thing I don't I mean, I don't think I invented it by any means, but I think we maybe have been successful in turning it from a little utilized tool into an effective weapon. Is open records law. You know, at the end of the
Mm,
day, we work for the government, and the government is accountable to a very stout open records law. And if you're getting stonewalled and your management's not willing to talk to you, and they're doing things that are potentially illegal, like discrimination, and they have settlements that they're paying out, and they're, you know, weaponizing the performance evaluation system or the discipline system. There's records there that they're legally obligated to provide. So we turn to that, you know, definitely as a tool that we've exploited, um, to try and get evidence of the stuff that they're saying hasn't happened. You know,
mm,
they want to claim that, oh, you know, discrimination or retaliation or this, that, the other thing doesn't happen. Well, guess what? There's records of it if it has, and they're legally obligated to provide them. So even at that level, you know, there certainly was a what appeared to be an attempt to withhold records or just ignore the records requests themselves. So we actually had to file a writ of mandamus action in Dane County Circuit Court just a few weeks ago.
mm,
So we'll see how that plays out. But that's one that I think people in public employment could probably use to better hold their management accountable. Without a contract, you have to use the tools that are available, and that's one that I think is there and perhaps is underutilized. And hopefully, hopefully we're able to, you know, see some success play out with it. We're still in the infancy and still going through a lot of those records, and we have a case coming up in front of the WERC, and we've also, you know, gone back to being willing to go in front of the WERC as one of our few options. But we've also then used EEOC and ERD complaints. People have gotten more willing as people have put themselves out there and filed those complaints. Uh, you know, a lot of our people are afraid of retaliation, so they just didn't want to do it. I'll just suffer in silence. But once a few people stepped forward and said, I'll go ahead and do that, and I think they saw some people starting to get settlements and recognize that, all right, it's not just me. It's not an isolated incident. So we have several ERD discrimination complaints and federal EEOC discrimination complaints for current members that are pending and working their way through the system. And that's not a perfect tool by any means. Those are really slow processes, but it gets it on the legal record. If nothing else, it continues to show a pattern of behavior and a pattern of a lack of accountability for management that at some point, you know, the whether it's legislative or executive branch, you know, our government's going to have to say either we're tired of paying out settlements, or we're tired of our management engaging in protected class discrimination. At some point, somebody's going to have to step up there and say enough is enough.
mm,
So those are some of the
mm,
tools that we've used, and I think it's important to share your not only your successes with your members, but your attempts.
mhm.
Like I look
Yeah,
at a lot of this stuff and I say, well, I don't see people getting held accountable, or I don't see the change, so I am not successful. And I beat myself up over that stuff, but I think it's really important to share the attempts, share your efforts, and let people know what you're doing. Um, and obviously successes are great to celebrate, but celebrate your efforts too. Show people that, you know, we're working together and we're going to continue to try to solve some of these problems.
that's great, great, and that's such a great point too, is that the work of the union can inspire members even when every fight doesn't result in the the most desired outcome. Um, I think, you know, I said this before, but I think you guys are a great example of uh, you know, how a group of workers can start with a relatively uncomplicated process, right? You know, you know, this, as I think I said earlier, this isn't a magic recipe, but I think a lot of folks think there is one, and we can't do this. But it can start with four guys in a restaurant or a bar making plans, um, and that even without collective bargaining, you can find ways to have a voice on the job. And that voice sometimes results in wins. Sometimes they're long and drawn out, but people see the wheels turning and they're involved in the process. So it's as I said, the direct example that I think would inspire a lot of people is across the public sector, but this is a lesson for the private sector as well. Um, I want to have the opportunity for us to take a couple questions, but and Angela might have to remind me how we go about this because it's been a while since I did one of these broadcasts. I did see, something just came up in the Q&A, so I assume that's where people can put their questions. So I'll read this one. It says, one of the things that give unions strength is that management understands that the membership is large and it's not just a few disgruntled employees. Strength in numbers. How has the secrecy of the membership hindered this unit's power? Do they disclose to management, the secretary's office, politicians, etc., how many members there are, even if they are not individually identified?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes. We absolutely once we hit that 50 member mark, I feel like is when I felt comfortable sharing what our membership levels were. Uh, to be fair, until we hit that 50 members mark, I didn't disclose how many we had, but it only took a few months to hit that. That initial growth was pretty exponential. And I've absolutely shared, as we've gone, like, wow, it's been 12 months since we started. In 12 months, we've experienced 1,000% growth. In 12 months, we've quadrupled or whatever. And I have shared the numbers. Admittedly, it's been it's been through word of mouth because our management still refuses to meet with us. But absolutely, I've told our secretary's office, the legislators that we've met with, as well as the governor's office, like, hey, this is not a couple disgruntled employees. This is a movement, and this is a movement that's really punching above our weight class. So we've absolutely shared that. That's a really good question, and we've shared it in several different ways. I think that's been part of at least one news article that was printed by a journalist was talking about huge membership growth. And we probably have talked about it several different times with different press related to the Act 10 collective
Mm,
bargaining lawsuit as well.
mhm, mm. Thanks. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question? We're just about out of time, but we could probably take another question if there is one. Oh,
Something
here's
just
one.
popped up here.
It says there's a saying that the boss is the best organizer because of egregious behavior, being out of touch, etc. Do you have any advice for agencies in which the management isn't overtly hostile to labor, in which there are fewer points of leverage, such as discrimination and harassment?
Yeah, I think just ask people what's important to you. Obviously, I think those anybody here listening today understands that a union is more than a collective bargaining contract. It's just us standing up for our rights, and part of it is not just standing up for your rights, but all of those in unions next to us too. And that's been a learning curve for me too. I found myself real quickly thrust into things like the Labor Forward webinar, and things that I never aspired to. One of which is being a union president. I can't wait for the day when I can turn this over to the next generation who's ready to step up. But I think there's that whole community, that sense of community, and and maybe the best way to answer that question is meet people where they are. Go out and ask people, and what if you were part of our union? What would you want us to do? It's your union. What would you want us to do? What's one thing we could do better? What's one issue that's important to you? Rather than coming at people like a politician and saying this is my values, elect me for this reason. Uh, that's not what we're about. We're about what are your values and what do you want us to work on? So if you don't have that boss, you know, you have two options. You can organize now so that when you do have that boss, you're ready to go, or you can wait until you do have that boss and you're suffering and people are angry and try to organize then. Um, and that maybe right there is an organizing or selling point. You know, I don't know that if you can find people in your organization who haven't had a bad boss or bad management and don't think that they ever will, I would probably move on to a different place to recruit. You know, there's people you can sell it to, and people that are just oblivious, and maybe if you find those people, it's just time to move on. Pick your
Thanks,
battles.
Ben. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Ben. That's a good response to that. Um, Well, I think we should probably wrap things up. I've got 12:41 by my clock. I want to thank the folks who came today to listen to Ben and his conversation with me. Um, I said it before, but I'll emphasize once again. I know that there are some folks in the room who are private sector, and I hope that you see a lot of lessons in this for you as well. Even if you have a collective bargaining agreement, you can have a collective bargaining agreement and a relatively uninvolved membership. And the lessons that Ben has implemented with his coworkers apply in those situations as well. It's a universal and as I called it before, uncomplicated process. Um, in addition to thanking our folks who attended today, I certainly want to thank Ben for being willing to do this, but also for the great work that you're doing and your coworkers in reviving your local and being just a superb example of the kind of the theme of this broadcast that we do every month, which is labor forward. As I mentioned at the outset, we try to highlight success and victories, and it sounds like you are really well on track with that theme with your coworkers. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. I hope everybody takes it back, spreads the word, and it's time to stand up, bargaining contract or not.
Can't end it any better way. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks,
Thanks,
Ben.
Tom.